Monday morning, 8:42. The revolving doors of Caldwell Holdings turned once, and a man in a faded canvas jacket stepped through, holding a worn craft envelope against his chest. A charcoal suit came fast out of the elevator bank. Their shoulders met hard. The envelope skidded across the marble. The suit looked at the scuffed boots, the faded jacket, and laughed. Deliveries in the back. And next time, watch where you're walking. This isn't a bus station. Phones came up. A barista paused mid-pour. The man on the floor gathered his pages and said nothing. The man they laughed out of that lobby held the only signature that could decide who owned the building above them. And not a single person who saw him fall knew his name. 3 weeks earlier, in a small cedar house outside Asheville, North Carolina, the kitchen light came on at 5:30 in the morning. Bram Aldrich, 38, set a pot of coffee on the stove and warmed a small saucepan of milk for his daughter. Junie was 7. She came down the stairs in pajamas patterned with paper airplanes, sketchbook under one arm, glasses slightly crooked. She climbed onto the kitchen stool the way she did every morning, and her father slid the warm milk in front of her without a word. He set out 2 pieces of buttered toast on a chipped plate and watched her eat for a moment before he sat down across from her with his own cup. The house was small and clean. 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, a back porch that looked out at a stand of pine. The pickup in the gravel drive was a 2009 model that Bram had rebuilt himself the winter Mara died. Neighbors knew him as the quiet man who fixed engines and kept seasonal books for 2 organic farms outside town. They did not know that he had once run strategy for a company on the 40th floor of a Charlotte tower. And they had no reason to ask. Junie pushed her sketchbook across the counter. I drew school yesterday. Bram looked at the page. A row of cartoon parents stood in a cluster near the school gate, talking, laughing. A small figure stood off to one side by himself, holding a lunchbox. The small figure had her father's jacket. He looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he took it to the refrigerator and pinned it under the magnet shaped like a tractor. He did not say anything, and Junie did not need him to. She finished her toast and went back upstairs to brush her teeth, and the kitchen was quiet again. That afternoon, the mail carrier brought a certified letter. The return address was a law firm on South Tryon Street in Charlotte. Bram read the letter standing in the doorway with the screen still open behind him. He read it twice. He set it down on the counter and pressed both hands flat against the laminate. Harlan Aldwin had died of a stroke at the age of 71. The letter named Bram successor trustee of the Aldrich Aldwin Trust, a private fund Harlan had operated for 19 years. In the bedroom, behind the bookshelf, there was a small steel safe. Bram opened it that night after Junie was asleep. Inside was an envelope Harlan had sealed years ago. Addressed in his own handwriting, the note inside was 4 lines long. When the Caldwell girl is cornered, you go. Not before. You owe her father that much. The instructions are with my counsel. Behind the note was a brokerage statement. Over 6 weeks, the trust had quietly accumulated 41% of the issued common stock of Caldwell Holdings, routed through 4 intermediary funds. Bram folded the note. He looked toward the hallway where Junie was sleeping. The wind moved through the pines outside the kitchen window. He stood there a long time before he spoke. And when he did, he spoke only to himself. 2 weeks, that's all I'm giving them. 2 weeks before the lobby, on the 40th floor of the Caldwell Tower in Charlotte, Renly Caldwell was running the 3rd quarter review. She was 34. She wore a navy suit, no jewelry beyond her father's wristwatch, and she did not sit when she ran a meeting. The conference table held 7 directors and 2 project leads. The screens behind her showed Riverbend Logistics Park and the Salem Mill redevelopment, both 18% over budget, both behind schedule. The light over the table was sharp and cold. Bracken Civil has stopped returning calls, she said. $4.2 million in advance. 3 weeks of silence. I want to know how that happened. Truett Marsh sat to her right. He was 52. Silver at the temples, expensive suit, the same one her father used to call his lucky one. He had been chief financial officer for 19 years. He folded his hands on the table. Renly, he said gently, Construction always bleeds in third quarter. Your father knew that. She did not look at him. I want the detailed cash flow ledgers on my desk by Thursday. The auditor has them. I'll see what I can do. It was the third time he had said that in 11 weeks. Odette Reeves, her chief of staff, made a small mark in her notebook and said nothing. She had been making small marks for 9 months. After the meeting, a board member named Hollis Bream asked Renly to walk with him to the elevator. He kept his voice low and his eyes on the carpet. There's a holder. Anonymous. Through 4 funds. 41%. 41. The disclosure window closes in 11 days. After that, they have to name themselves. He paused at the elevator and pressed the button. You should be ready for whoever walks in. That afternoon, the Trust's outside counsel emailed Renly directly. The controlling shareholder would arrive in person on the morning of the 14th at 9 o'clock, no escort, no announcement. The email closed with one line, per the trustee's standing instruction. Renly printed the email and laid it on her desk. She assumed a raider. She told her assistant to clear that Monday morning and to leave whoever it was waiting in the outer office. I want him to see how we run things, she said. Odette watched her from the doorway and did not answer. Odette had worked at Caldwell for 12 years. She remembered the name on the trust faintly, the way a person remembers a song from a long time ago. She did not say so yet. She went back to her desk and pulled the bottom drawer open and closed it again without taking anything out. That night, Renly stayed in the office past 9. She stood at her father's window and watched the city blink on. The long red line of brake lights down Tryon Street. She had run the company for 2 years since he died. She had not yet decided whether she was running it well. Monday came. At 8:43 in the morning, she walked into her own lobby and saw, in passing, a small commotion near the doors. A man on the floor. Papers. Crane Voss laughing. She did not slow down. Bram had every right to be in that lobby. The 9 o'clock meeting was logged through Trust Council. The floor cleared. His name on the security manifest under a corporate alias. He had come in early on purpose. He wanted to see the lobby the way an ordinary man saw it before anyone bowed. Crane Voss, head of investor relations, came out of the elevator the way Crane always did, looking at his phone and trusting the world to move around him. The collision was honest. The laugh that followed was not. Crane glanced at the jacket, the boots, the craft envelope on the floor, and he made his calculation in less than a second. Deliveries in the back, he said, loud enough for the security gate to hear. And next time, watch where you're walking. This isn't a bus station. The lobby learned how to look without looking. A barista paused mid-pour. 2 analysts by the turnstiles glanced up and then down again at their phones, recording. The security guard, taking his cue from the suit, walked over and asked Bram to step outside. Bram bent at the knees, gathered the pages, fitted them back into the envelope. The top corner of one folder slid briefly into view. A small embossed seal. Aldrich, Aldwin Trust. Confidential. No one bent low enough to read it. A junior analyst named Priya Shah crouched to help. She picked up a single page and held it out to him with both hands. Crane's voice cracked across the marble. Leave it, Shah. Back to your desk. She straightened. Her face went hot. She did not look at Crane, and she did not look at the security guard. She looked, for a fraction of a second, at the man on the floor. She had seen his face up close. She would remember it. Renly crossed the floor in heels. She glanced once at the scene. Delivery dispute. She registered and kept walking. She would replay that glance later, more times than she would ever admit to anyone, including herself. Outside, in a thin Carolina rain, Bram stood under the awning of the building across the street and called the Trust Council, pushed the meeting. 2 weeks. Sir, I want to see the company first, not the version they prepare for me. By noon, the 9 o'clock had been rescheduled to the 28th. By 4, a finance industry account on LinkedIn had clipped the lobby footage and captioned it, "When you forget which door is yours." 11,000 views by sunset. By the next morning, 68,000. One of the people who shared it was the mother of a girl in Junie's second-grade class. That night, in the Cedar House, Junie came into the kitchen with a tablet in both hands. She held it the way she held things she was not sure of. "Daddy, is this you?" "Why are they laughing?" Bram dried his hands on a dish towel. He took the tablet, set it face down on the counter, and crouched so his eyes were level with hers. For 4 years, he had answered every hard question his daughter asked him. Not always well, always quickly. This time, he did not have an answer ready. "They will stop laughing soon," he said finally. "I promise you that." He held her until she fell asleep against his shoulder. Then he sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, and the rain on the windows was the only sound in the house. The clip kept circulating somewhere out in the city. He did not check the count again. By the third day, Bram had rented a one-room office above a bakery on Trade Street, 2 blocks from the Caldwell Tower. The lease was in the Trust Council's name. The bakery downstairs sold sourdough and bitter coffee, and the smell came up through the floorboards every morning at 4. He spent the mornings reading every public filing Caldwell had issued in 5 years, every quarterly, every footnote. He read with a pencil in his hand and a yellow legal pad open beside the laptop, and he made a small mark every time a number did not behave the way numbers should. By Wednesday, he had seen the pattern. Subcontractor payments on Riverbend routed through a single clearing account in Wilmington, Delaware. The timing of the largest disbursements matched, almost to the day, Truett Marsh's published board travel calendar. He circled 3 dates and underlined a 4th, and then he turned to a fresh page and began to map the shelves. That afternoon, Priya Shah walked into the bakery on an errand. Her team had ordered a client gift basket, and she was the most junior person in the room. She came up the narrow stairs by mistake, looking for the restroom, and found Bram instead. She stopped in the doorway. He looked up. "You were the man in the lobby," she said. "I was. I'm sorry about Crane, boss." "You're not the one who should be sorry." She did not know why she sat down. She had a valuation model open on her laptop, Riverbend. Her team had missed the deadline twice. She had been told on Friday that one more miss, and she would be moved off the project. Bram asked, without standing, if he could see it. She turned the laptop toward him. He looked for 90 seconds. He wrote 3 lines on a napkin and pushed it across the small table. Row 412, sign flipped. 4.2 million on the wrong side of the ledger. She read it. She looked up at him. He had already gone back to his pad. She ran the correction that night, alone at her kitchen counter, and her hands were shaking by the time the spreadsheet recalculated. The number recovered the missing margin to the penny. She did not sleep. She sent the model to her director at 6 in the morning, with 1 line in the body. "Found it overnight. Please re-review." Her director assumed she had cracked it alone, and by Friday afternoon had moved her onto the audit support team, the same team that held the keys to Truett's project ledgers. She came back to the bakery on Saturday morning. The office above was empty. Under her coffee cup at the corner table, folded once, was a new napkin. 1 sentence. "If you ever notice the same vendor invoice twice in 1 week, write down the dates. Don't tell anyone yet." She folded the napkin and put it in her wallet, behind her license. Across town, Odette Reeves was pulling lobby footage for an insurance claim about a slipped delivery. She scrubbed past Monday morning at 8:42. She paused. She zoomed in on the embossed seal on the folder corner. Aldrich Aldwin Trust. She sat very still. Then she opened her bottom drawer and took out the company directory from her first year at Caldwell, 12 years old, stiff at the spine. She turned to the strategy department photograph. She found 2 faces left of Renly's father. A younger man, with the same level eyes. The name underneath read Bram Aldrich, Director of Strategy. She closed the directory. She did not call Renly. Not yet. She needed to be sure of what she was about to do, and to whom. That same Saturday, Renly took her father's old watch to a jeweler on Providence Road for a service. The jeweler held it up to the light and smiled. "Your father wore this every day for 30 years. I know, sturdy thing, like the man. She drove back to the office on a Saturday with no good reason. She sat in her chair on the 40th floor and looked out at the city through her father's window. Something in her had not been right since Monday morning. She could not have named it. 6 days after the lobby, at 7:19 in the morning, Bracken Civil filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. By 11, Caldwell Holdings was exposed for $18.4 million in unfinished work on Riverbend. By 11:30, Truett Marsh was in Renly's office. "I've found a replacement," he said, sliding a binder across her desk. "Halcroft Build, fully bonded. They can start Monday." "At what cost?" 12% over Bracken's number. "It's the cost of speed, Renly. If we miss the milestone, we breach the covenant with First Carolina. And you know what that does to the stock?" She turned the binder slowly. The cover page was clean. The signatories were clean. The filings inside were thick and looked complete. The thickness, she would think later, had been the point. "I want my own counsel on this. There isn't time. The bank wants a name by Friday. I've already had legal walk it." "Who in legal?" "Renault. He signed off this morning." Her in-house counsel, called in for 5 minutes, gave a conditional green light pending post-signing review. The decision moved from her desk to the boardroom by Thursday, and back to her with 5 signatures by Friday afternoon. Truett collected the executed copy himself and walked it down to filing. She signed under board pressure. She did not sleep well that night. She stood at her father's window again, and the city looked exactly the same as it had on Saturday, and she could not have said why that felt wrong. In the elevator alone, Truett exhaled and allowed himself a small, private smile. The elevator camera caught it. No one reviewed the footage that week. Odette would later make a note of that too. Wednesday of that week, Junie spiked a fever of 103. Strep. The school nurse called Bram out of a 4-hour document review with Trust Council. He left mid-sentence, drove 90 minutes through traffic, and carried his daughter from the school office to the truck, her cheek burning against his collar. He sat on the couch with her against his chest and a damp washcloth on her forehead, reading filings on his phone with one hand. She slept and woke and slept again. The afternoon light moved across the wall. Near midnight, she opened her eyes. Her voice was small. "Daddy, are you the bad guy at that company? A girl at school said her mom saw you on the internet. She said her mom said you got fired." Bram set the phone down. He held her closer. "I'm waiting for the right day, Junie. Not a day longer than I have to. What happens on the right day, the laughing stops." She thought about that. Then she put her hand on his and went back to sleep. On Friday morning, Priya Shah opened the audit queue and saw a Halcroft Build invoice come through. She matched the wire routing instructions against a Bracken Civil invoice from 6 months earlier. The instructions were identical. The correspondent bank in Wilmington. The intermediary code. The account suffix. She wrote both dates down in a notebook. She did not tell anyone. She kept the notebook in her bottom desk drawer, under a stack of expense reports nobody ever opened. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Bram's phone lit on the couch arm. A single text from an unknown number. "I know who you are. We need to meet. O.R." He looked at Junie, asleep against him. He looked at the screen. The Cedar House was very quiet. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, and somewhere in the city, on the 39th floor of the Caldwell Tower, Odette Reeves was still awake. They met at a diner off Interstate 77, 20 miles north of Charlotte. At 6 in the morning. Odette wore no makeup. She had brought the 12-year-old company directory and a manila folder. She had told her husband she was driving up to see a cousin. Bram was already in the corner booth when she walked in. He had ordered her coffee black. He remembered. "You're Aldrich," she said when she sat down. "You worked for her father. Why now? Why like this?" Bram poured cream into his own cup. He did not confirm. He did not deny. Has Truett ever delayed a cash flow ledger before this year? She looked at him for a long moment. The waitress passed, refilled her cup, moved on, 3 times, all in the last 9 months. He nodded once. He slid a small USB drive across the laminate. "Public filings only," he said. Wire routing matches. Timing overlap with Truett's travel. Ownership trail on Halcroft build. 3 shells deep. Ending at a Cayman entity registered to a woman named Bevan Marsh. She looked at him. Truett's ex-wife's maiden name, he said. She put her hand over the drive without picking it up. Her wedding ring caught the diner light. You could walk into her office with this tomorrow. I could. She wouldn't trust it. She would spend a week wondering what I wanted. And if I bring it, don't bring it as mine. Submit it through the internal whistleblower channel. The bylaws her father wrote will auto-route it to her. And to outside counsel at the same time. She will find it. She needs to find it. Odette took the drive. She closed her hand around it the way a person closes their hand around a coin they have decided to spend. She filed it that night at 11:47 in the evening through Caldwell's anonymous ethics portal. The system, per a protocol Renly's father had written into the bylaws 20 years before, auto-routed the file simultaneously to the CEO and to outside counsel. Renly read it from 12:20 in the morning until 10 minutes to 4. She cross-checked 2 wire references against her own records. She did not sleep. By the time the sky started to gray over the river, she had a name and a shape and a face for the thing that had been wrong for 9 months. At 8:30, she called Odette into her office and closed the door. You filed this. It was not a question. Odette did not answer it directly, she said. You need to meet someone. Alone. I'll give you an address. Who? Someone your father trusted. Renly looked at her chief of staff for a long moment. 12 years. Odette had been there 12 years. Odette had never once given her bad counsel. Give me the address. That same afternoon, Priya Shah walked into Renly's office without an appointment, holding a notebook. She set it on the desk and opened it to a page of dates. Same wire routing on Halcroft and Bracken, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. 6 matches in 14 months. Renly looked at her for a long time. How did you know to look? Priya hesitated. Someone told me to. I didn't know who he was. Renly closed the notebook. She thanked Priya. She kept the notebook. She did not need to ask Priya for a description of the man. She already had one. That evening, she keyed the address Odette had given her into her car's GPS. The route ended in Asheville. She stared at the screen for a full minute. Then she picked up her keys, told her assistant to cancel her dinner, and went down to the parking garage alone. The drive took 2 hours and 10 minutes. The light had gone soft over the mountains. By the time she turned off the main road and onto a gravel drive, the house was small and clean. A pickup in the yard, a porch light on, a child's drawing in the kitchen window, taped to the inside of the glass. Renly sat in her car for a full minute before she got out. She had rehearsed 5 opening lines on the drive. She would use none of them. Junie opened the door. She was pale from the fever, holding her sketchbook against her stomach. She looked up at the woman on the porch with the careful eyes of a child who has learned to read adults early. Are you a friend of my dad's? Renly swallowed. I work with him. Junie considered this. Then she opened the door wider. Bram was in the kitchen. He did not stand up when she walked in. He poured her a cup of coffee in a heavy white mug and set it in front of the empty chair across from him. He did not apologize for the house, and he did not reintroduce himself. She placed the USB on the table between them. You built this. Why route it through Odette? Why not just walk into my office? Because if I'd handed it to you, you would have spent a week wondering what I wanted. This way, you spent the week looking at the evidence. She did not have an answer to that. She wrapped both hands around the mug. He opened a small cedar box on the counter. He took out a photograph and slid it across the table. Her father, 12 years younger, on a construction site in Charlotte, rolled blueprints under one arm. Next to him, a younger Bram, sleeves up, the same level eyes. She recognized the project before she recognized the face. It was the build her father had always called the one that saved the company. The Westbrook Project. She had been 11 years old. She remembered the day he came home and lifted her off the porch and spun her once and said, "We're going to be all right, kiddo." She had not understood, then, what he had been afraid of. I ran strategy for him from 26 to 34, Bram said. I left 2 months after Mara was diagnosed. He understood. He introduced me to Harlan Aldwin himself. Harlan made me his successor trustee. In case the company ever needed an owner who couldn't be bought. She looked at the photograph. She looked at the man across from her. The man she had walked past in her own lobby. The man whose face she had not bent down to see. You're the holder. I'm a trustee. The trust is the holder. How much? He did not answer the question. He said, your father left me an instruction. I'm honoring it. That's all you need to know today. Junie came in barefoot, sketchbook open. She crossed the kitchen with the absolute confidence of a child who knows she is welcome everywhere in her own house. She handed Renly a folded drawing without ceremony. Renly unfolded it. A man at a school gate, standing alone. Renly set her coffee down very carefully. She looked at the drawing for a long time. She did not say she was sorry. Not yet. She did not trust her voice. Her phone buzzed on the table. She looked. The color left her face. An emergency board notice from Truett Marsh. Motion to remove the chief executive officer. Vote scheduled for Friday at 9 in the morning. 3 days away. The wording of the motion was clean and procedural, and she realized had taken weeks to draft. Truett had been ready for this moment longer than she had been ready for the company. Bram read it over her shoulder. His voice was quiet. Then we have 4 days. She looked up at him for the first time without anything in her face that resembled the woman who had walked past him in the lobby. She nodded once, the way her father used to nod when there was no more time to argue. Friday morning, 8:55. The 40th floor boardroom. 7 directors at the long oak table. Truett at the far end in his lucky suit, calm, with his personal counsel beside him, and a thick binder titled Governance Stabilization Plan. Crane Voss in the back corner, taking minutes for investor relations. Odette Reeves at the wall, hands folded. Priya Shah in the outer office, waiting in case she was called. Renly sat at the head. She did not speak first. She had not slept the night before. She wore her father's watch on her left wrist, and twice in the last hour she had touched the crown of it with her thumb, without realizing she was doing it. She let Truett open. He was patient. He cited the Bracken collapse, the 18 million in exposure, what he called Renly's unilateral decisions. He proposed himself as interim chairman, pending an orderly chief executive transition. He had whipped 4 votes. He needed 4. If the motion carried, it carried. This isn't personal, he said, looking down the table at her. This is about stewardship. Your father would have done the same thing. Renly laid the whistleblower file on the table. She presented it without raising her voice. She did not look at Truett while she spoke. She looked at the 4 directors he had whipped. Truett's counsel objected at once. Anonymous, uncorroborated, out of order under Bylaw 9.4. The board cannot consider unsourced material in a governance vote. 3 directors visibly wavered. Hollis Bream looked down at his folded hands. He had known Renly since she was 9 years old. He had known Truett longer. At 9:07, the boardroom doors opened. Bram walked in. He was wearing the same canvas jacket from the lobby. He did not look at Truett. He did not look at the directors. He looked, first, at Renly, and he held her gaze long enough for one full breath. Then he stepped to the side and let the trust counsel pass him. Behind him came the trust's lead counsel, a tall woman in a dark gray suit, carrying a single sealed folder. Crane Voss, in the back corner, looked up from his minute pad. He saw Bram. The pen in his hand stopped moving. The color went out of his face by degrees, like a window losing light. He set the pen down on the pad, very slowly, and did not pick it up again for the rest of the meeting. The trust council placed a notarized certificate in front of the board's secretary. The secretary, an older woman who had been with Caldwell since the founding, read it aloud in the voice of someone who had been waiting 12 years to read something exactly like this. Aldrich Aldwin Trust, beneficial holder of 41% of issued common stock of Caldwell Holdings, exercising shareholder rights under Section 12 of the bylaws. Motion to table. Truett half rose. His voice cracked at the edges. And who exactly are you two? The secretary read the next line. sole trustee and signatory, Bram Aldrich. The room stilled. Hollis Bream lifted his head and looked at Bram and then at Renly, and his hands unfolded on the table. Bram did not sit. He set a second folder beside the first. The dossier, corroborated now by Priya's notebook and Odette's ledger logs, formatted to bylaw standard. He looked down the table at Truitt. He spoke for the first time in that room in 12 years. "I'm not here to take the chair," he said. "I'm here to keep someone from selling it." Renly looked at him across the long table. She did not smile. She gave a single small nod. It was the same nod her father had used to give in this room when a fight was already over. Two of the directors who had been ready to vote with Truitt leaned back from the table. Truitt's counsel set his pen down very slowly. Bram opened the second folder. He turned it, so the first page faced Truitt. "Page 1 is your ex-wife's maiden name," he said. "Would you like to read it? Or should I?" Truitt did not answer. Bram walked the board through the dossier in under 20 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He did not flourish. He read, "Page 1. Halcroft builds ultimate beneficial owner, traced through 3 shell entities to a Cayman trust registered in the name of Bevan Marsh, the same Bevan Marsh who had been Truitt's wife from 1996 to 2004. Page 2. Wire routing instructions on 6 Bracken civil invoices over 14 months, identical to Halcroft's. Same correspondent bank in Wilmington. Same intermediary code. Same account suffix." Page 3. Server room access logs, pulled lawfully under shareholder inspection rights, showing Truitt Marsh badging into the finance floor's restricted ledger room 4 times on Saturdays in the past quarter, after hours, alone, when the floor was officially closed. Page 4. A sworn affidavit from Priya Shah, audit support, dated the previous day, confirming the duplicate invoice pattern she had independently logged. The notebook was attached as an exhibit. The dates in her hand-printed columns matched the wires on page 2 exactly. The room did not move. The director seated directly across from Truitt, a man named Reginald Krause, lifted one hand to his face and held it there. Truitt tried the human angle. His voice went lower, almost gentle. "Your father and I built this company when you were still in—" Bram cut him off. He did not raise his voice. He brought it down. "Her father built this company. You've been selling it back to yourself 1 invoice at a time. And I've counted every single one." The boardroom was so quiet that the second hand of the clock on the wall was audible. A pen rolled half an inch on the table and stopped against a folder. No one reached for it. Renly's hand, on the watch at her wrist, went still. 2 of Truitt's 4 votes physically leaned back from the table. His counsel closed his binder. Hollis Bream put his pen down and folded his hands again. But differently this time. The director to Hollis's left, a woman named Marjorie Ellis, who had served on the board for 16 years, drew a single line through something on the legal pad in front of her. The board secretary called the motions. The motion to remove the chief executive officer. Withdrawn for lack of a second. A new motion under bylaw 11.2. Suspension of the chief financial officer pending federal review. 7-0. A federal referral to the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of North Carolina was filed by 11:15 that morning. 2 compliance officers escorted Truitt Marsh out. He did not look back. He did not look at Renly as he passed her chair. Crane Voss, in the corner, had not moved. His pen still rested on the page where he had stopped writing. The minutes for that meeting would later be transcribed from the board secretary's own notes. Crane's pad was found. Hours later, blank from 9:07 onward. Hollis Bream, who had been at Caldwell since Renly was a child, turned in his chair toward Bram. "We need a chair through the audit cycle," he said. "Statutory minimum, 90 days. "Will you sit?" Bram answered without sitting down. 15 days. Long enough to seal the books and put the right person in this chair. Then I go home to my daughter." He did not look at Renly when he said it, but she heard it. She heard all of it. The motion was put. Bram Aldrich, interim chairman of the board of Caldwell Holdings, effective immediately. Term not to exceed 15 business days. 7-0. As the meeting adjourned, Bram crossed the room to where Renly still stood. He drew a small yellowed envelope from the inside of his jacket, her father's monogram in the wax. "He asked me to give you this on the day you needed it," he said. "I think today is the day." She held it without opening it. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were not. 2 weeks later, the pickup still came into the visitor lot of the Caldwell Tower at 8 in the morning. The receptionist who had once watched him fall stood up the first time he walked in and said, very quietly, "Good morning, Mr. Aldrich." He nodded. He did not bring it up. He never would. Cranevoss's resignation letter was on Bram's desk by 9. Bram signed it with one written line on the cover sheet. Approved. Leave the building by noon. Renly opened her father's envelope alone in her office. The letter was 3 short paragraphs in his handwriting. The last line read, "Trust him with the company, sweetheart, but trust yourself with the rest. He's not staying. He shouldn't." She folded it. She walked down the hall to the temporary office Bram had taken, the smallest one on the floor, and set the letter face down on his desk. He did not pick it up. "I already know what it says," he told her. "He read me the first draft 12 years ago." She allowed herself then a small breath that was almost a laugh. He spent his 15 days closing the books. The Halcroft contract was declared void. $18 million in clawback litigation was filed, and in time, recovered. Riverbend restarted under a vetted contractor out of Greensboro. Priya Shah was promoted to Associate Director of Internal Audit. The napkin from the bakery, folded twice, stayed in her wallet behind her license. Odette Reeves was confirmed as Chief of Staff to the Chief Executive Officer, with an observer seat on the board. On the 15th day, Bram signed the chairmanship over to a retired federal judge the board had vetted, a woman named Margaret Ainsley, who had served on the federal bench in Charlotte for 19 years. He packed nothing because he had brought nothing. He left his employee badge on the corner of the desk and the keys to the temporary office in the top drawer. Junie came to the office that afternoon, the first and only time. She wore her good shoes and held Bram's hand all the way up in the elevator. She handed Renly a new drawing without ceremony. 3 figures at a school gate. Her father, Renly, Junie, none of them standing alone. Renly held the drawing for a long moment. She put it in the top drawer of her desk, where her father had once kept his lucky pen. That evening, after the floor had emptied, Bram and Renly stood at the 40th floor window. They did not face each other. They looked out at the Charlotte skyline, the river beyond it. The soft, early dark, coming down over the city. Junie sat on the sofa behind them, sketchbook open, drawing something neither of them looked at yet. Renly said, after a long while, that there was a small place outside Asheville she had been meaning to see. She had heard the coffee was good. Bram, eyes still on the city, did not turn. "It is," he said. Neither of them had been looking. But somewhere between the lobby she had once walked past him in and the window they now stood at together, the distance had quietly closed.